it's that time right now where, we've joked about it before in training camp and stuff like that, where it's getting old, right? It's getting old to players. So I'm not shocked to see this week be the week of, man, it seems like there's a fight or two every day at practice, right? It's just you're at the point now as a player where you're physically worn out, right? You can't wait for, a little reprieve from the preseason training camp, a little to get your body to recover. You still haven't been at home or in a normal routine yet, right? And it's all just coming to a head here at the end of training camp where, it's frustration and people wanting it to be over more than anything right now.
I still have a broader concern as it relates to joint practices. That there has to be a level of trust, and there has to be control over your players to prevent what we saw yesterday between the Raiders and the Rams. And last year it was Aaron Donald swinging the helmet violently of a Cincinnati Bengals player, fortunately hitting someone else with a helmet on instead of someone without a helmet on, because that could have been a serious injury last year when this happened between Aaron Donald and someone from the Bengals. This is yesterday, Cam Akers and Max Crosby. You just have to control your guys. And I wonder how much of it, from the coach's perspective, is accepted because, as D'Amico Ryan said earlier this week, finally, we want to see some of that. We're willing to accept the possibility that somebody's going to get injured because the greater good is served by this emotion bubbling to the surface like crude in the backyard of Jed Clampett. We finally, you're going to risk hitting a varmint when you fire that shot, but you may just hit a spot that pops up a little bubbling crude that helps it's a very dated reference, by the way, but it helps your team's interests. We'll trade an injury to 1 of 90 if it means elevating our overall mood and our overall tenacity to a higher level. Does that make any sense? Is that why they keep doing it? Because I wouldn't after the past year or two, I sure as hell wouldn't do joint practices with the Rams because Sean McVay can't control his guys. Well, that would be my takeaway.
I hear you there. I mean, we had one before that even, right? Was it them and the Raiders that the melee broke out into the sidelines of a training camp practice, or was it them and the Cowboys, right?
Cowboys. Cowboys.
Hey.
Years ago.
So, yeah, right. So, I hear what you're saying there in a lot of ways, and a lot of coaches, they want their players to be chippy and push the limit. Now, they don't want like a full melee fight to break out and get it to the point where, it is somebody getting hurt. There's a hand broken. There's a shoulder separated or whatever like that. They don't want that. But, there's a fine line, Mike. If things are too quiet and calm at practice this time of the year, most coaches don't really like that. When they see a little scuffle and a little bit of a skirmish, it brings a smile to a lot of coaches' faces, a little side smile, a little devilish smile, right? I mean, I can remember seeing that on John Gruden, on Jeff Fisher, right? When, practice was a little dull and something like that happened, and there was a little like, okay, now we're awake, let's go. And that's the old school mentality of football. But you don't want it to cross over. And it does seem like there's more fights breaking out between teams in these joint practices this year than maybe other years that we've seen.
I'll give you an example. I remember this like it was happening right now. My son had football practice when he was in the 8th grade, and they were doing some drill, and his friend did something that got him pissed off. So he got very aggressive, and he hit him in a way that he probably shouldn't have. And the coach was like, you can't,
yeah, exactly,
hey,
right.
You can't
proud
do that.
Of you, but you can't do that. Right.
You can't. No, you can't do that. Yeah, I said that will be fine. And I remember the reaction, that kind of like, this is what we'd like to see, even if it's happening in a way that it should. And I'll tell you exactly how this plays out. Here's the end game. Eventually, year after year, practice after practice, one of these days, during one of these fights, somebody's really going to get hurt. I think we can assume that if you spin that wheel enough time, and guys are throwing helmets around, and there's big, strong men in each other's faces, and they're punching, and they're swinging fists, and helmets or whatever. Somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get hurt. And, of course, when that happens, you know what will occur? The NFL will swoop in like they had no idea something like this could transpire. Like, well, we must do something now about this. Even though it's been happening for years, possibly, because it may be years from now before somebody really gets hurt at one of these. That's when the NFL comes riding in on the white horse with the big shield and starts punishing people, suspending people, invoking language from the personal conduct policy, such as violent or threatening behavior toward another employee or a third party in any workplace setting requires some sort of discipline. They don't think about that now because nobody's gotten hurt. But I guarantee you, Chris, the moment somebody gets hurt, and I mean really hurt,
yeah, I got you.
Fractured skull because I got hit by a helmet or something like that, that's when the NFL will do something to stop something that they should be stopping now. They don't care about this. They don't care at all about these guys fighting with each other during practice, whether it's player on the same team or player from another team getting into the fight. The league just kind of not our concern.
Yeah. No, it is a little surprising that way. They've never gotten involved in training camp and stuff like this in years past. That's not kind of in their DNA or their history there. I will say, because I remember us having this conversation a little last year with the Aaron Donald thing, where, hey, it's become more of a, this is not just practice anymore that nobody sees. These are joint practices that are spectacles, that there are cameras there, there are fans and large amounts of fans there, and we've seen some of these fights spill into the crowd a little too, right, Mike? I mean, I think we had one in New England a few years ago where there's been a few to where that's where I'm always a little surprised that the NFL doesn't have a little bit more of a overall governing rule over these joint practices and how you should act and everything like that. Because I know it's not a game, but yet it's still something that, hey, teams are charging for these people to come in to watch training camp. It is on TV. It is still about setting an example for the youth of football and everything like that and doing it the right way. And that's where I could see the NFL at some point finally saying, you know what, we need to get involved here. It just ain't a good look for us, this going down like this all the time.
And I know exactly when that'll happen. When a fan gets injured by one of these fights. That's exactly when it'll happen. Because at that point, somebody is going to be writing some big checks. Because when you charge someone money to come into your place of business and spectate, you have an extra duty to them than just somebody who'd be wandering by your front yard. You have a duty of care. You have a duty to take care. You have a duty to protect those individuals. If someone would get seriously injured or injured at all in a fight that spills over into the fans, and I remember the fight that you were referring to earlier between the Cowboys and the Raiders or the Cowboys and the Rams, and there was like some very loose snow fencing involved, right, and fans were right there.
Yep.
As a former lawyer, I was horrified by it because, beyond what's right and what's wrong, you try to protect your organization against unnecessary liability. And there is no liability more unnecessary than creating a scenario where you've got men in armor who are large and strong in a position where they are fighting with each other, and it spills over into the paying crowd that has come to watch this. And on game day, there's a more natural barrier at a football game, not necessarily at a basketball game, as we saw in November of 2004, but it doesn't happen where it spills over into the crowd in a stadium.
Right.
It almost has a couple of times, but at a training camp practice, it can very easily. So if it ever does and somebody gets injured, that's when everybody's going to have to write checks. And that's when the NFL is going to get pulled into this for not doing anything. The NFL, as we've said time and again, reactive, not proactive. There will be potential problems out there hiding in plain sight for years, if not decades, and they won't do a damn thing about it until it becomes something that they say, maybe we should do something about that. Yeah, maybe you should have done something about it before somebody gets hurt, before it creates an event where you got to start writing big checks to people. It's amazing to me. It is one hell of a way to run a business, but it just shows you how strong that business is, that it can be run in that fashion and still thrive. that it can be run almost like a Mr. Magoo enterprise where you're blind to everything until it hits you right between the eyes and then you do something about it. It really is astounding.
It is. It's amazing we've gone this long.
Today.
Yeah. It's amazing we've gone this long without something major happening, really. I mean, it is in some ways. It is. But, again, I think the fact that it hasn't happened, I think the fact that, hey, for the most part, through history, teams have done a pretty good job of governing themselves as far as, training camp fights or not, at least not having disasters.
They've gotten lucky.
But they've gotten lucky. I don't disagree with you there. I don't. And that's where, whether it's a governing rule over these, again, and it's not always joint practices. Hey, we're going to talk about the Cowboys here in a second, right, too. They were practicing against each other. They're sick of seeing each other, too. But the other thing I come back to with a governing rule or, the things you're talking about spilling over into the crowd, see, there's no repercussions right now for this, for the players, right? And that's really the biggest thing. What stops them in a game is what? Damn, I got a personal foul. Now it's 3rd and 27.
Or I may get kicked out.
Or I'm going to get kicked out of the game and lose a game check or suspended next week. Exactly right. So that is the thing that gets guys in each other's face, but that's what stops it from being full-out fight on the field because they go, whoa, hold on a second. I don't want to lose the game. I don't want to ruin my career and all that. There's none of that in training camp. And I think what we're saying is maybe that I don't want to see players fined anymore. I'm so sick of seeing players fined or whatever, but at the same time, maybe it has to happen.
Chris, it is entirely possible to compartmentalize these two opinions. Number one, Aaron Donald, one of the best defensive players of all time. Aaron Donald, every time we've been around him, away from the football field, gracious, funny, friendly human being. Right. We like him. Right. We like him. But he should have been suspended for what he did last year in the joint practice against the Bengals. We said it last year.
Yeah.
That's the only way to get it to stop. And when you have a guy who is swinging a helmet so hard that when it strikes another helmet, it flattens like a pancake. Think of the force that he applied with that very powerful body he has as he swung like a windmill, an accelerated windmill, that helmet. That is something that falls squarely under the personal conduct policy if the league wants to do something about it. It's an act of workplace violence. And it is. And there's so many people that are like, oh, it's football. All the people who either never played or would never get involved in any physical altercation at any time unless they have their gun with them, right? It's football. It's football. Well, it's not football once the whistle blows. It's not football once you remove someone's helmet and start swinging it around. That's not within the rules of the sport. I don't have the rule book in front of me right now, but I think that removing someone's helmet and using it as a weapon is frowned upon in the official rules. So it's not football. It's not what anyone signed up for. It's not within the risks that you assume when you go out and play. I remember getting into an argument years ago with another lawyer about potential liability for hockey fights. Like, at what point are you no longer submitting to the risks? And there are many risks when you go out onto a hockey rink, whether it's that little rubber missile that's frozen solid or all the sticks and the blades and all the different ways you can get injured, and then some guy beats the crap out of you. Like, at what point is it beyond the line of what you've assumed? And in hockey, it's a little more difficult because they fight all the time. In the NFL, having, yourself whacked over the head with a helmet that some 300-pound guy who is the strongest dude around is swinging, that's not what you signed up for. No, so that's why they need to intervene before. Right. At 345, come on. I mean, you're capable of spinning a bunch of different plates. If a couple of morons like us can realize this thing that is hiding in plain sight that could cause a lot of problems for everyone, surely you see it too, and you can fix it. And it's easy to fix it. Start meting out discipline for these fights, whether it's joint practices or whether it's team within team. Because, no, look, And you mentioned the Cowboys fights.
Yeah.
Sam Williams and Brock Hoffman got into it yesterday.
Right.
Also, Micah Parsons and Tyler Beatis got into it. I never can pronounce his name right, but so I just do it fast and keep moving. So
we know
yes. So Beatis, potato. And I'm sorry, as someone whose last name has been butchered over the years. Yeah, but so there's the fight. But you know what? The Cowboys are never gonna suspend anybody, no matter how bad he gets.
No.
At Cowboys training camp. They're never going to take action because they're hurting themselves if they do. That's what the league is for. The league is there to take action that the team will never take against its own players because the team hurts itself by making its best players not available.
Yeah, it is. It's a fine line. You know, Jerry Jones and Mike McCarthy, they want a little life and juice, but like they don't want that. Right there. They don't want one of their defense ends getting blindsided by somebody that wasn't actually in the fight there. That's the other thing, too. And then this is what happens when that happens, right? Because now the defensive line's pissed at the offensive line because they feel like, hey, wait, you cheap-shotted one of our guys. And they're just waiting for their moment again to go, wait, that was a little cheap or whatever, and they're going to get their payback. And that's what, to me, that's, probably what happened. It started the chippiness there beforehand, and then it filters over to another drill because they're still mad at each other, and you just got to be careful there. That last one, hey, again, it's not perfect there, but okay, that's a training camp fight. All right, boom, boom. Hey, what the hell? They grabbed each other for a second. They got separated. That's fine. The first one, that's the one you worry about where that goes a little crazy, where some guy just comes off the sideline and waylays somebody there, right? That's where they got to be careful. And I don't know, maybe that got a little too crazy too. I didn't see all of that. But, that's where there is an ethics to how these fights go down and how they should play out. But 63 coming out of nowhere to crush Sam Williams, and he wasn't even involved in it or seeing him. Yeah, that's a low blow. That's kind of a BS move, and that's one the coaches and the owner got to talk to him about.
And you said something earlier that resonated for me, the idea that the second fight was a byproduct of the first one because now the defensive line is out to get the offensive line. How many times have we heard the league obsess over that concept with taunting? Not even with physical contact.
Yeah,
we don't want taunting because
it's always
then later in the game, you're going to have somebody looking for payback. And that is an admirable and appropriate concern. We've defended the league in that regard. But why does the concern end only when a game is happening? How do you have this massive blind spot, deliberate, conscious? It's not like, I don't know it's there. You know what's going on. You have access to the same footage we do. It's all out there. Why do you not care about that? Why is that okay? And you're going to micromanage the behavior of players during games, but you're going to ignore the behavior of players during practices, whether it's their own team or whether it's multiple teams coming together for joint sessions. And even, it really is astounding to me that they don't care.
Well, and as you were talking about that, I'm going, well, why is it that we hear about this type of stuff? They're there at the OTAs. We just talked about it 2 days ago. They're there at the OTAs to make sure teams are doing things the right way and not getting too crazy and physical. Why isn't there somebody there for the actual practices that are crazy and physical? That does not make sense to me either, right? So, we're going to be there for the practice with no pads on and a helmet and tell you if it's too physical. But now it's training camp and it's physical all the time. And
go ahead and beat the shit out of each other.
Exactly. That doesn't line up exactly in the common sense world there.
Sorry, control room. But that's the attitude. You're right. And that's the thing. We're not saying that, this isn't some moral position. It's just, we can't reconcile the way the NFL obsesses over behavior in game, the way the NFLPA obsesses over behavior in OTAs that are non-contact, and this open season mentality during training camp practices. Boys will be boys. Just let them go, hey, they're just blowing off a little steam. It's okay. It's okay. Until somebody gets seriously injured, and then they'll say, oh, this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. This can never happen again. Well, it never should have been happening because you can't make it mesh with the way that you police players in games and the way that you police off-season workouts and the way that you police players when they're away from the field. This is the one area, because I guarantee you if if one of those guys started swinging a helmet at somebody out on the street, there would be a significant and immediate NFL punishment. This is the one zone of dispensation, for lack of a better term, where you can just go do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Unless your team does, and your team's not inclined to, because your coach is like, yeah, that's what we want to see.
Yeah, exactly. You never hear anything about the team ever unless it's a guy on the bottom of the roster who's doing it too much, right? And then they make him an example and they cut his ass and he's gone.
Oh, we handled it. We handled it internally.
Yeah.
That's what Sean McVay said last year about Aaron Donald. We handled it internally. Yeah, what'd you do? Hey, Aaron, next time maybe don't swing the helmet quite so hard.
That would be a good thing. Well, I know, we spoke out strongly against that, and then we did the week 1 game, them versus Buffalo, and I remember being there pregame going, man, Aaron Donald listens to stuff. I know he does, and I would not be shocked if he heard us say, yeah, he should be suspended. And I felt like he said hello to me, and we're buddies that way, but I felt like he gave me a look like, hey, I heard what you said. All right, so he checked me there.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.